Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to go through this 2022 player contract status article on the Overwatch League website and just kind of talk about it, talk about what we now know as we go into free agency, the types of players or which players will be free agents for this upcoming season, which ones will be under contract. We have had some rumors going around about certain players being signed to certain teams. I'm not going to talk about any types of like rookie talent. I want to make a separate video kind of talking about some rookie talent that's coming up from wherever I kind of can, so your NA rookies, your APAC rookies, your EU rookies, all that type of stuff. But I want to focus just right now on these players that were in the league, players who who have retired, who is under contract, who is a free agent, all that type of stuff, as well as the way in which it was done. And I'll talk about a little bit about certain leaks or certain rumors for certain teams, ones that we have or that we've seen confirmation for, we've gotten information about, just so you guys have an idea of what's going on. So this article's in alphabetical order. So here's just a little run through just to let you guys know what's going on. So you guys kind of have an idea. Free agency began on Saturday. That's when players could sign, I think, or something got released. One of those two, I don't remember exactly. But the past couple of days, we've kind of seen some news and stuff coming. So the thing you need to know is that if it's under existing contract, it means that they had a contract that already had them under contract for the 2022 season. So that's either a contract they signed for 2021. Usually it's like a 2-year contract that they signed for 2021 and 2022. Under a new contract means that their contract was set to expire, and they are now re-signed with that same team. If the 2022 option was exercised, it means that they had an option, a 2+1 or 1+1 contract that they could then choose to either extend, and so that player would stay under contract for another season, or they could decline it, as you can see in the free agent team option decline for 2022, or they may have been under a contract that was already just changed. You can see here, this information is current as of October 10th, 2021 morning. And so they said later this week we'll publish the player tracker with signings, releases, trades, and update it regularly throughout the winter. But let's go through team by team. Like I said, it's an alphabetical order. Let's start with the Atlanta Reign. Got some interesting stuff with them. So you can see here, Edison is a free agent. They did not extend, or they didn't sign a new contract for him. His contract expired. Kai signed a new contract to remain with the Atlanta Reign. Pelican, the 2021 Rookie of the Year, had his option exercised, though there are reports that they are looking to trade away Pelican as they build a Western roster. And so the question then becomes, why would you even exercise the contract or the option in the contract if you're just going to get rid of him? And the answer is that you can get more by exercising the option and trading him than you would just letting him walk in free agency. That's kind of the main thing they're going for. Gator and Hawk are under new contracts, so they are going to remain with the team. The team made the decision to keep both of them. So they had an expiring contract, and they are now staying with the team. And then the support line, full changes. Iris, Masa. Iris's contract expired, and Masa had his option declined. There are reports and rumors about who the Atlanta Reign are signing, but I don't want to talk about it too much. I'd rather wait until we get more into some kind of news, and I'll talk about free agents when we kind of get there. But they're looking to get some rookie players as well as some veteran players to fill in some of their holes. Obviously, with the loss of Edison and reportedly Pelican, they need new DPS players, and then they'll need a new support line. But there are rumors and reports about who they're going after. The Boston Uprising, for me, are a very interesting team, and it's one of the reasons why I'm excited to talk about them, because they are a team, to me, that make very little sense in terms of the moves they have made. So in the DPS side of things, ColorX and I'm37, both of their contracts expired. They have not negotiated any new contracts there. Valentine had his option exercised to remain with the team for 2022. So still one DPS player on this roster, a Korean player with Valentine. Tank line wise, Fusion's his contract ended and he retired. Gableshee is still under contract from before. Punk had his option exercised for 2022, and Stand 1, who had the option, they declined it. So they have Gableshee and Punk for tanks. And then in their support line, they exercised the option to keep Faith, but they declined the option to keep Myeonbong. And that's where I am so shocked, because I think that Myeonbong is one of the best performing players on this Boston Uprising team pretty consistently. And they were they seemingly wanted to build the team around him. Now, maybe Myeonbong went to Boston and said, I don't want to play for this team anymore. But with the fact that they had Laurie and they had his head coach, I mean, you kind of would expect them to keep building this roster around him. But clearly he didn't want that. So no Myeonbong anymore for the Boston Uprising. This team is the one that I'm most concerned about right now, I'm most confused about, because they have 3 Korean players in Valentine, Gableshee, and Faith, but then they also have Punk. So they have 2 off tanks right now. I don't understand this team. This team's odd. This team is confusing, so we'll see what happens. Obviously, it's too early to say anything for sure, but this is a confusing team to me. Chengdu Hunters, an interesting one. All 4 of their DPS players are under contract. Jimmy and Taro Quickie are under an existing contract, and Jinwoo and Leave have been signed to new contracts. 2021 MVP Leave returning to the team. Tank line, Among, his contract expired. They did not give him a new contract. Gaga, under an existing contract, he'll still be with this team. And Late Young, his option was declined. I'm not familiar with Chinese contenders. I don't know if there's many really good Chinese off tanks coming up right now, but Late Young is gone. So the only tank right now in the Chengdu Hunters is Gaga. And when you go to the supports, all 4 of the support players on this team are still under contract. Farway, Monk, and Nisha are under existing contracts, so they'll still be with the team. And Yveltal's contract was, there was an option and it was exercised, which is kind of surprising to me, considering the kind of drama surrounding Yveltal in the playoffs, where he didn't play, he didn't practice well, and so they cut him, basically, or they benched him. But they still have him under contract. They not even that, they exercised the option to keep him, so I'm a little surprised with that, but Chengdu had a good season, so it's not that surprising to see them not make major changes, but definitely expecting something in that tank line, somebody to come in and make some changes, because really it's just Among and Late Young leaving this team, so they'll have to sign somebody new for next season. Dallas Fuel, we kind of already know. They've announced everything. They've already said who they were keeping and who they were getting rid of, so we know where everybody is at. So Doha, his option was exercised for 2022. Sparkles was as well. Pine, option was declined. And Exy, his option was declined. So those 2 will be free agents. So they'll be looking for a DPS player there. Both Fearless and Hanbin had their options exercised. So both tanks will be staying with the team. Then in the support line, Fielder, options exercised. Repel, retiring. His option was not exercised. His option was declined, so he's retiring. And then Jexa going into free agency, his option was declined. So they're going to look for a new support. Who knows who it'll be? There's players like Sanguinar that are going to be out there, so they have options, but they have chosen not to go ahead with Jexa and instead are looking elsewhere. So really, for this team, looking at main supports, looking at hitscan DPS for them going forward. The Florida Mayhem, they cleaned house, basically. Every player but Yaki has had their option declined or their contract has expired. BKB had an option, they declined it. Gargoyle, OG, both had options, both are declined. Gangnam Jin and Slime, both had options, they were declined. Checkmate just didn't have an existing contract. Going forward, Yaki was signed to a pretty long contract, I believe, after last season. But there are rumors and reports similar to what is going on with Pelican, that the Mayhem are going to be getting rid of Yaki. And Kuki as well will be leaving this team. Those are the reports and the rumors that the Florida Mayhem want to go for the Western roster, focusing more on some of the kind of like American Tornado contenders players. But there's been no reports about who they've signed, if they've signed anybody, just that Yaki and Kuki will also be leaving this team. And so the Mayhem will be a very different looking team in 2022. regardless of whether or not those are true. Like, even if it's just Yaki and Kuki that are staying, it's still a very different looking team because most of the team will be gone. So, interesting to see what will happen there. Guangzhou Charge are an interesting one, in my opinion, because their big moves, of course, is their support line, completely gone. Both of those players had contracts that expired, so those two both gone, Kariv and Mandu. DPS side, Choi Se-wan, Eileen, both still under contract, neither of them going anywhere. Kaylee, his contract expired, he is now a free agent. And then in the tank line, Krong and Rio were both under an existing contract, so they will be sticking with the team. And then Ji-hun, his contract expired and he is going. So I would expect them to, of course, make support line changes. They'll bring in some players. Who knows? There's lots of options out there. Jex is going to be available. Yunbong is available. There's other flex supports we'll get to. Obviously, some of the big ones have already been announced, like Jonak and Twilight. So we'll see what happens. But there's been some changes here. But really, the main thing you're going to look at, I think, with this Charge team is we're going to see changes. Adding another DPS, one preferably able hit scan, and then a support line change. For the Hangzhou Spark, went a little too far there. So they're holding on to Architect and Shy, their DPS line. Both of them had their 2022 options exercised. But So Min-soo, whose contract has expired, is now a free agent. Their tank line, no changes. Bernard had his option exercised, and then Gushui and Ligue are under contract already, so they're still with the team. Their support line, however, is completely changing. Coldest, his existing contract expired. IDK, his option was declined. And Mika, his contract also expired. So some pretty potential major changes there for the Hangzhou Spark and their support line. They'll probably bring in another DPS player, but as things stand right now, they are looking at Architect and Shy as their lineup for the future. Those two were very good last season. They didn't really play a lot of So Min-soo anyway, so I would be surprised if they just roll with those two. But support line is where their big changes are going to come. Big surprises here at the Houston Outlaws, though. This is a team that made a lot of changes, many of which I was not expecting. They have one player under contract going into 2022, and that is Piggy. Piggy had his 2022 option exercised. The rest of the Outlaws roster, entirely free agents. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean all of them are going to leave. Happy and Dante, both of their existing contracts have expired. They could re-sign with the team. Dante, I believe, was a free agent as well last season, and he signed a one-year contract to stay with Houston because he probably believed in the team's vision. He could always stay. Who knows? He just hasn't signed a new contract yet. He'll probably test the waters of free agency, and we'll see what happens. He might return after that. Happy has already talked about, that he's looking at options. And KSF, it's not listed here, but he has announced he was going to retire after the season. So, goodbye, KSF. One of my favorite players of all time. He has officially retired. Tank line-wise, Dreamer, Jong-gu, both of them had their options declined. So, lots of main tank shakeups. Not as many off-tank shakeups, but lots of the main tank players are going to be free agents. We're going to see a ton of shakeups. A lot of the main tanks are going to be on the market. So, interesting to see this because I think both of those players were good. And they went with neither of them. And they're going to test the waters, try to find somebody new in free agency. Then in the support line, the fact that they list Jake as a support, to me, is really funny. But I guess that's what he played most of this past season, so he is considered a support. But Crimzo, contract expired. Jake, contract expired. Juby, his option was declined. So we'll see what happens with this team going forward. But right now, the Houston Outlaws is just Piggy. Some of these players may return, because sometimes you decline an option to kind of build a new contract. But right now, Houston Outlaws are a team that had made some major changes, and we're very quiet about it. Nobody really said anything about it. So, big surprises there with the Houston Outlaws. Probably the team to follow going into the offseason right now. Another team that I think is going to be interesting to follow is the LA Gladiators. They have made some pretty major changes. Birdring, retiring. Mirror, free agent. His contract expired. The only DPS player returning for this team is Kevster, who was a role star, so you're not gonna be too upset. And he is under a new contract. They have re-signed him to a new contract for 2022. The tank line, Space, his existing contract has expired. He has confirmed on Twitter that the LA Gladiators did extend him a contract offer. He is just going to test free agency, kind of assess all options before making a decision. So if you're a Gladiators fan, the team doesn't want to get rid of Space. Space is just testing his options to potentially return to the team should that be the option that he thinks is the best for him. To me, a surprise, though, is that they are letting Muse go, declining his option. I'll talk about it a little bit later what I think may be going on here, but Muse not going to be with this team going forward. It's definitely a surprise for me. So they may have a completely new tank line next season. Then in the support line, Moth did not pick up his option. Not that surprising considering he didn't really play much down the stretch this past season. They opted to go for Skewed on the Brig way more often. So could just be Moth's a little more expensive than they would want if he's not going to get as much playtime. But they are keeping both Shoe and Skewed, exercising both of their options. So some of the all-stars on this team still going to be here with Shoe and Skewed, really good players, and Kevster staying, but potential major shakeups for this tank line, and we'll see if they go for another support to kind of fill the shoes of Moth now that he is no longer with the team. The LA Valiant, pretty boring team to really talk about. Every single player on this team is a free agent. All of their contracts expired. We all knew this was coming, when this was going to happen. They were the worst team in the league. I don't really care what happens with the Valiant this offseason. I've just lost so much faith and hope in that organization. I wish the best of all these players. Hopefully they all find a home somewhere, but I think it'll be pretty difficult for a lot of them. There's definitely a future for players like Crystal, Malanron, and Wuya, who looked pretty good at times, but it'll be tough. Moving on to the London Spitfire, they made some pretty major changes as well. On the damage side, both Blase and Hybrid had their 2022 options declined, so neither of them will be with this team still. Shax and Sparker, however, will still be with the team as their options were exercised. So they're building around Shax and Sparker because, as you can see, Hottie and Molf, both of them had their options declined. Kelix, option declined, and Reapa, option declined, opting to retire from the Overwatch League. So it'll be interesting to see what the London Spitfire do. You have players like Funny Astro and Masa now on the market. Potentially London Spitfire going the route of building not a contenders roster. There's also a decent chance that a lot of the British Hurricane players end up on this team, but very different looking at London Spitfire team built around Shax and Sparker going forward. The NYXL, another team that announced all of their players that were going to be leaving. Feather and Guangboom on the DPS line. Both of them had their options declined for the 2022 season. Bianca has retired. I don't know exactly if he had an option or not, or if his contract just expired. I assume he had an option, and he is gone. Kalius and Yakpung both had options for 2022. Both of them were declined. Friday, I believe, had an option. His was declined, and he has elected to retire. And Jonak, who was under an existing contract, that contract has expired, and Jonak is now a free agent. So it's only Flora under contract for the 2022 season for the Overwatch League, for the New York Excelsior. I didn't mean to say the Overwatch League there. Anyway, Flora's option was exercised. He is going to be on this NYXL team. They're going to build around him. Tons of potential for this team. Rumors are that Kuki is going to join this team as the head coach. He's going to be their new head coach, which will be interesting to see what happens. I think Kuki had a good 2020 season as head coach. This past season, not as good, but how much of that was on him, who knows. If he does end up on this team, we'll see what happens. And we'll see how the NYXL kind of build going forward. But I will be interested to see the NYXL of 2022 building around Flora as their kind of centerpiece. Paris Eternal, some pretty big changes for them. Letting both Onigod and Suna go, declining both of their options. Onigai kind of surprised me. That Onigai was a really good player last season. Kind of surprised they did not exercise that option. But they are holding on to Naga, who I thought was arguably the best player on this team last season. Also keeping Don under contract, exercising his 2022 option. Though Vestola, who I thought had a great season, joining this team kind of late in the season, is not returning. His contract has expired, and they have not chosen to re-sign him. I guess they could, in theory, re-sign him should they choose, but they did not get a contract underway. There's some other players out there they might go for. We'll talk about in a little bit. And then the supports, Khan and Dredro, both of them had their options exercised. So right now it's the Naga, Don, Khan, and Dredro show, and we'll see what happens with the rest of the roster. Next is the Philadelphia Fusion. As you can see, some pretty big stuff going on here. DPS-wise, Carpe is the only player under contract, as he is under an existing contract. He's been on this team now for a while. He's still under contract, so they have Carpe for the long run. The only remaining player, it seems, from day one Overwatch League rosters to still be with a team. EQO, his option was declined. He will be a free agent. Rascal has elected to retire, and Shockwave had his option declined. Shockwave is certainly a potential player to look out for with the Paris Eternal. I don't think he'd fit as well in the Loaded Spitfire because his hero pool kind of just crosses over with Shax and Sparker, but does not really cross over much, with the exception of Echo, with the Paris Eternal. So he's definitely a player that you should look at there potentially to be on that team. Tank line-wise, all of the tanks on this team no longer with this team. Mono going to do military service, so it's not really fully a retirement, but probably is. I don't see him returning after that. Poco and Hoppa, both of their contracts have expired, and they're free agents. Look out for Poco potentially to join the Paris Eternal. I still think Poco is very good. Still think he has some fight left in him, and he said he's looking for teams, so definitely would not be surprised if Poco ended up with the Eternal. Hoppa, we'll see what happens, but his contract has expired. They are holding on to Alarm. His option was exercised for 2022. Funny Astro, his existing contract expired, and he is now a free agent, and Toby has retired. There are some reports and some rumors that this team might go full Korean. There are reports that head coach 9K is leaving the team as well, so we'll see what happens. The only two players that have under contract are Carpe and Alarm, both of which, of course, are Korean players. Funny Astro has basically said that he could still return to the Fusion, but he is not at the moment returning to the Fusion. So we'll see what ends up happening. Astro could end up on London, right? Like London could sign him, and they could sign another, they could find a flex support that they like and continue to build in that Western roster. There's a lot of potential for changes. The Shock could go after Funny Astro. Who knows? There's a lot of potential options. But I don't want to spoil anything. Gladiators go after Funny Astro. There's tons of players that may end up on different teams. Speaking of the Shock, they did announce on Twitter that they went with a major change to their roster. Tons of players released, tons of players still under contract. So let's take a look here. All of their DPS players are gone. Glister, Nero, Ants all had options for the 2022 season, all of which were declined. Tayo's contract expired, and he is now gone. Choyobin and Smurf had 2022 options, both of which were declined. So they were, they're gone because the team opted to let them leave. Could have been the players' decisions. They didn't want to stay with the team, but that is what happened there. And Super was on a contract. His has expired, so he is now a free agent. Could still end up with the Shock, but who knows? We'll see what goes on there. For the support line, FD God's option was declined, so he is going to be a free agent. Twilight's contract expired. He's a free agent now. And Violet is the only player returning to the Shock. He is under a new contract. So the thing that interests me about this Shock team is really Super, Smurf, Choyobin. Like, those are some really good players. Those players are going to find homes, and they're going to be incredible players. And I think Twilight's another player. Like, he's going to end up on a team and be really good. FD God will probably end up on one of the teams that is moving to like Western rosters potentially. But the reason why I think Super is very interesting is because Space, as I mentioned before, said that the Gladiators offered him a contract. He just opted to go into free agency to kind of test the waters. I think Super and Space are going to try to play together. I think they're going to try to end up on the same team. Obviously, we're going to 5v5, so they wouldn't play next to each other. I think they want to play on the same team. So I would say be on the lookout for Super and Space to potentially sign, both sign for the Gladiators or both sign for the Shock or both sign for another team somewhere in the Overwatch League. Who knows? Maybe Florida. Who knows, really. But that's one of the things I'm keeping my eye out on. So if I were you, I would keep my eye on that as well. Seoul Dynasty made some pretty major changes as well. They did sign 2 players to new contracts, and that is Fitz and Profit. So they are both under contract for 2022. Huge changes everywhere else, though. Sabiolbi retired. He announced that on Twitter. We knew that one already. Goodbye, legend. We'll always love you, Sabiolbi. You're my boy. Best of luck. Gesture, his contract expired. He will be a free agent. Marvel, his contract also expired. He will be a free agent. And 2U had his option declined for 2022, making him a free agent. And then for the support line, Onimo's option was declined, so he will be a free agent. But Creative had his option exercised, so he will be remaining with the team. So just Fitz, Profit, and Creative right now. Definitely could be a landing spot for some of the big name main support players. Jexay could end up with this team again, though I doubt it. Return of Sanguinar potentially this team. We'll see what happens. IDK, who knows? But major change for the Seoul Dynasty. It was teased, so we know that Fitz and Profit are staying. We know that Creative is staying. Everything else up in the air. Shanghai Dragons, 2021 Grand Finals winners, 2021 champions. This is a team that we knew was basically keeping this whole roster together. That was announced by the team themselves. The only player that is leaving is Develop, who they declined his 2022 option, but Fleta, they exercised his option. Lip is still under contract. Who Are You option was exercised. Fate still under contract. Void option exercised. Izayaki under contract. Lee Jae-gon, Molly, both of them had their options exercised. So this team pretty much all together still, so I would expect them to still be one of the best teams in the league going forward because they still have the championship roster pretty much entirely intact. Losing Develop, to me, doesn't really mean a whole lot. Toronto Defiant, we already know they made major changes. They announced major changes to this team. Hisu, the only player returning to this roster, his option was exercised for 2022. For Aspire, Logix, and Neist, their contracts all expired, and they were not brought back. Tank line, Michelle, Sato, both of them had their options declined. And then with Ansun J, Aztec, and Lastra, they were on one-year contracts. All of those expired. They're all free agents. So, Defiant, major rebuild around Hisu. Potentially, we see Yaki and Hisu reunite. Maybe we see Gangnam Jin come back. Maybe we see Runaway make a return. Maybe Runaway just becomes the heart of Canada. Starts in Vancouver, goes to Toronto. Who knows? Who knows? Speaking of Vancouver, they have also made major changes to their roster. And by major changes, I mean they have gotten rid of every single player on this team. Dalton and Rolf, their contracts expired from 2020. And then with Linkser, Teru, Fried, Chongsik, and Fire, their 2022 options were declined. So who knows what Vancouver is going to be going forward. They're going to be a completely new team. There's no way we can have any expectation what they're going to be because this team is completely different going forward. So another team to keep an eye out on because we don't know what to expect. Final team is the Washington Justice, which we have seen some of the moves that this team is making, but we didn't know everything, of course. But this team is largely sticking together. The main area they're making changes is in the support line, where both Bebe and Closer had their options declined. So they are definitely a potential landing spot for some of those big-name free agents, like potentially Jonak or Twilight, just to name a few. And then their tank line staying together. Mag, they actually signed to a new contract, which will be staying with the team. And Fury, they exercised his 2022 option to keep him with the team. Tuba, his option was declined for 2022, and then Assassin, Decay, Jerry were, they were put on 2-year contracts, so they are still with the Justice. So some teams making a lot of moves, some teams making not as many moves, but that's kind of just a general look over at all of this, kind of giving you some idea of what's going on. I know this is a long video, it's 30 minutes, just me kind of going through and reading it, but I want to give you guys kind of updates, let you guys know where we are, explain it in case you didn't really know, and also give you some of the information on some of what we know in terms of leaks and rumors and stuff like that. We don't know everything yet, but that's where we are at with all of that. So let me know your thoughts on anything I talked about in the comments down below. I'll have a link to this article in the description in case you want to look back on it any time, look at certain teams. Like I said, there's going to be an off-season tracker that the Overwatch League posts eventually, so we'll have that. But I kind of wanted to give some of my reactions to this, kind of give you some of my thoughts on it, and just give you guys a little update on it. But yes, that's it. 2022 off-season is here. We're getting ready. Overwatch 2 is coming, and get excited because we are going to see some major shakeups on so many rosters. So many rosters are stripped down to the bare minimum, and they're going to be rebuilt from the ground up. So get excited. I am. I'm sure you are as well. And yeah. So hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, consider liking and subscribing for more like it in the future. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.